can start whenever.
Okay. Looks like people are trickling in. First of all, thank you guys so much for coming in. This is our second champion of the year, and I'm guessing there are going to be a lot of newer members here, which is exactly why we have Devin, who competed in principles. So, Devin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi guys, I'm Devin. I'm a junior at Carlmont High, and I competed in Principles of Hospitality and Tourism last year.
So, what initially sparked your interest in your principal's event?
So I think honestly, I stuck with Principles of Hospitality from the very beginning. I think in one of the first meetings for our chapter, they were just showing us the different principles events, and I was kind of drawn to like the first year only aspect of it because I was like, okay, I can't compete with these other kids. And then from there, it was more of I knew. I didn't really do too much research into it when I was choosing it, but I felt like hospitality, with like customer service and all that, I felt like I was more drawn to that than per se something like I don't know, finance, which might require a bit more technical skills, which to be honest, I didn't really want to learn. And so hospitality seemed pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, so for hospitality and the specific event that you chose, how did you go about building the actual knowledge for principles or hospitality and the skills necessary to succeed in your event?
Yeah, so specifically for principles of hospitality, I think this is true for like all principals events in general, just for any like first years. It's usually going to be a lot more like broad knowledge. So, with the more individual series, you get more specialized as you go on. But the principles, you might find yourself in a wider variety of scenarios, but they won't go as deep, I guess I'm saying. And so for principles of hospitality, I would study just as many role plays that I can to get a feel of what they would typically test you on, which for PHT would typically be things like a manager at like a restaurant or a hotel or maybe a cruise line, for example. And based off of that, I would start to try to not only just do the full practice role plays, but look at these role plays and start to think about some types of things that I could say. And so, based off that, I could go look up maybe articles about the restaurant industry and just get some more general tips that I could apply to any role play scenario.
That's great. So, what are some key strategies for handling the fast-paced environment of a role play? And also, how do you handle all the nervousness?
So yeah, I think role plays, like you said, can be very fast paced, and therefore it's kind of hard to think on the spot and plan for. So I think outside of like your actual prep itself and outside of actual competitions, you want to get like the most set things you can. And what do I mean by this? This means like drafting out kind of a specialized intro that I could turn to for the first 45 seconds of any role play that I could cross apply, like introducing myself, shaking the judge's hand, giving a bit of context to the case study, and then basically just going on at the end of the role play by saying, "Hey, that's all I had for today. If you had any questions, feel free to ask now." So I could give the judge that natural segue into the role play. And so when you come into the room and start your role play, you're not just kind of scrambling around to think of what to say on the spot, and at least you have some sort of uh, not objective, but kind of something that's a little set in stone that you can lean on for any scenario.
Yeah, so I love how you talked about kind of having that like 45 seconds, especially in the beginning for your introduction. What does that structure look for you, or yeah, look for you for kind of like throughout the duration of your event? Is it more, obviously you have your planned out intro, but for the middle part, do you have planned out spaces where you're talking about things or things that you might repeat from role play to role play, so you might not have to create new ideas for each one?
Yeah, so I guess my typical role play structure, I mean, this might differ for like individual series because you have more PIs or like TDMs, but because for principals you only have four, so I would typically go like maybe 1 minute intro or so, something like that, depending on like how much context I feel like giving in the moment. And then like maybe 8 minutes on PIs, so like 2 minutes each, and then leave yeah, like another minute for questions. And so in the middle of the role plays, I don't really have any like set things other than just like transitions. So if I'm leading to my next PI, you could just say something simply like, oh, and that leads me into my next point and about blah, 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 or the importance of blah, blah, blah. And then another kind of like objective thing I like to have is you're gonna start to see, and like especially in these principled events where the scenarios like they're not they don't go as deep with like the more like specific PIs. You're gonna see a lot of the same repeat PIs, which I noticed a lot when I was studying for my event. For example, like in there's a lot of communication role plays in PhD, and you get the PI like explain the importance of or explain the nature of like effective verbal communication or something. So I knew like when I was prepping, if you can see that PI and then you have like a set prop, for example, when you're doing your studying that you know you can apply to that PI in any sort of scenario, that would be great. So, for example, for me, that was something like a T chart showing like do's and don'ts for verbal communication. And so, no matter what the specific case would be, I could just use that anywhere.
Yeah, I agree that like studying up on your PIs is definitely a super important like study tactic. So what do you think that the most common mistake competitors make in principles is, and how can you avoid that?
I think the most common mistake people in principles would tend to make is probably just not being specific enough, like with their I guess with their both like their solutions and the way they describe their PIs. So principles, because the PIs are very broad and like just the content is typically not as hard and not as technical as these individual series events. People tend to just take that at face value and like these very simple PIs and just define the PI. But in principles, since it's basically the level playing field for everyone, you're gonna want to have to stand out the most with your specific props as well as like just giving specific examples in your role plays. So in principles, like when I've judged some people's role plays, they do give like a good example or a good definition of the PI, for example, and can tie it back, but they don't really have those like unique diagrams, for example, down that are key to standing out in like such a highly populated event as well.
Yeah, sounds great. So, there's obviously for the principals events, there are people that have never done role play before. So, kind of piggy or going back on that idea of nervousness, what would you kind of just looking back at your experience, especially when you started your first role play, what's three main pieces of advice that you'd give to people who are trying to not be nervous during their role play and try to have some sort of structured way of speaking?
Yeah. All right. So I guess the three biggest tips I would give for someone that struggles with nerves is like, first of all, like beforehand, when you're at comps, for example, you don't want to be like stressing too hard about it and you don't want to get in your own head. Like, I know it's kind of like easier said than done, but I know a lot of people in comps go running around like, oh, I got to cram these PIs. Oh my God, my role plays in like 5 minutes. I'm gonna get there like 3 hours early. It's like, when you build that sort of mentality, it's gonna stick with you the whole way. And so when you actually get in that room, you're going to be thinking like, oh my God, like it's do or die. And so it's like that doesn't always have to be the case. It's just like a competition. I mean, obviously it's pretty important. Everyone wants to succeed, but you don't want to like take it that seriously. Second part is you don't want to see the judge as like some sort of warden. Like they're just another human being as well. So I know a lot of people, they walk up to the judge and like they go shake their hand like, uh hi, nice to meet you. And then like they try to be all professional with it, and try to say what they think the judge will want to hear. But the second you start to like treat the judge as just another like human, like because yeah, as soon as you start to treat the judge as just another human that's just simply watching you, like they have in life too. Like they're not just some like solid figure in a vacuum or something. You'll start to realize that you can build a lot more confidence. Because if you went up to like your friend at school that you talk to every day, you wouldn't really be like shaking and trying to use all this fancy jargon to impress them. No, it would flow nice and conversationally. So you want to apply that same logic to the judge. And then finally, to kind of kill the nerves, I think I'd say set some time in your prep away, maybe like the last 30 seconds to, just take a breath. Think about what you're going to say, look back over your notes. You don't want to be cramming all this time into like, there's 5 seconds left on prep. Oh my God, I got to think of what I'm going to say for PI4. No, that's at one point, like, if your brain is racing that hard, you're not going to be able to generate as ideas that easily. So I think it's really important, especially if you struggle with nerves or like shaking your legs um, and doing like bad habits, for example, you just want to take some time in your prep just to slow down. And you can do that during your role play too. Like no one's really forcing you to like rush through everything. If you have something that you're trying to think about and articulate to your judge, don't try to force it out. Just literally you can take a second and the judge will understand too, because once again, they're just a human. You can take a second and articulate your idea slowly, without trying to rush.
Yeah, going back on your point earlier about how you mentioned different like graphs and charts you were making, can you give some examples of what types of graphs and like graphics you were presenting to your judge?
Yeah, so some examples, I guess, of some graphs were in like at ICDC, the prelim role play was on marketing. And so I hadn't really studied marketing before, but I knew that I was gonna try to tie in as many like props as possible because marketing, obviously, you're gonna want to be as like creative as possible. So it was a scenario on like some hotel that's like launching a new restaurant. So I like drafted up a social media post for the judge and show that to them as well as a picture of like a menu, for example. But like when you're not thinking in the moment, and going back to what I was talking about earlier when I was doing my practice role plays, and you kind of get the same instructional areas, like when I was preparing some of the props, you want to be thinking like outside of the box as much as possible. So, for example, for economics, I know that's a district area for a PhD this year. If you get like once I looked at the PI, explain the nature of competition, which is like a big one that appears a lot. I would make like both. I would do two things. I would make like, for example, a little spectrum kind of, and on one hand you have a monopoly, and the other you have a direct competition. Then I would rip out I don't know. Okay, this might sound kind of weird, but I would take my paper, I'd rip it into like little cards and then use that as a demonstration. Like, okay, in a Monopoly, I have the house has all the cards, but in a direct competition environment, I would just hand it out like to everyone, and therefore it's a more level playing field. So if you can connect your PIs with those props to more both be creative and stand out, as well as like to break it down a bit easier to the judge, I think that's like the biggest thing you could utilize.
I really like the example that you gave with like showing like the visuals. I think that's something really creative, and I think something that everyone can learn from. My question is, how would you balance the idea of sort of, because in a PI you usually give sort of like a brief overview of what it is. How do you balance explaining it versus incorporating your idea into it and like giving that to your judge?
Yeah, so I think when you're reading off your PIs, your first sentence or two can be just like about a broad definition of the PI. But when like, this kind of goes back to the biggest mistake people make, which is like not going deep enough. I think people need to like you got to understand like DECA's putting these PIs for this specific case study for a reason because they're supposed to be tied in. They have some importance. So don't just be thinking about like um I don't know, like whatever PI. Think about it in the context of the scenario. And so like a basic structure you could do for PIs is maybe a sentence or two for the definition, maybe tie in like a real world example or and like demonstrate your prop through that, and then kind of I guess tie it back to the prompt and your solution in general.
So in PHT specifically, customer service is super important. And how are you ensuring that your role plays are prioritizing the customer experience?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for customer service role plays, which like obvious like you said, they're very common in PHT. You kind of want to separate, like adapt to your audience basically. So you wouldn't use the same kind of tone that you would when you're speaking to your CEO, for example, that you would when you're speaking to a customer. So you can't be like you wouldn't be as technical and you wouldn't be as like straightforward when you're talking to a CEO because in the end when you're trying to resolve some sort of customer service scenario, you want to have that lighthearted tone. You don't maybe like cut back like this might sound kind of counterintuitive, but maybe cut back on all of the professionalism to more appeal to the judge and seem more enthusiastic. And then a lot of the time in these customer service scenarios, it's like it's kind of like there's no right objective answer, which there's not in real life a lot of times. Like if a customer forgets to read a policy, for example, I know that's a common structure for like a customer service PI, and then they get mad. So you want to be thinking not about, okay, it's you at fault. You want to be thinking, oh, I'm so sorry this happened. Explain your PIs like more, I guess, kind of just in a nicer tone, and then start thinking about some creative, maybe like reimbursement props you could make.
Yeah, so how do you think so for a lot of people this is like obviously their first year and they don't necessarily know how much DECA can kind of provide for them. So in your experience, how do you think practicing for competition and your experience in DECA has kind of changed you, especially for and preparing you for like future roles or careers?
Yeah, I think DECA has definitely played a huge role, both in like letting me go out and develop the skills just to go and meet new people, which is like a really important skill in general. Like before maybe DECA, I would be a bit more hesitant to just like go up and talk to anybody. But I think both the communication skills, like not just like obviously DECA can provide you with a good base foundation for technical knowledge and like educating yourself. But I definitely think the biggest thing that anyone can take away from DECA is those communication skills, especially those communication skills in like a more, I guess, fast-paced setting because you're not gonna always be able to prepare things. And then on like the other hand, I focus more on my role play than my written, but for people that focus more on their writtens, it teaches you like kind of discipline as well to be able to organize with your team and then figure out how you can best work together and then get this project done, for example. So I think definitely the discipline it builds in your studying as well as the communication skills, which is the biggest thing.
And can you share a time when you had to adapt to a major challenge during the competition and how you handled that?
Okay, yeah. So this was during my finals role play. There were a few things. First of all, my role play was at like 2, and so I get on the shuttle bus at 1. And so I'm waiting there for 45 minutes, and then the bus driver tells me they're leaving at 2. So I had to sprint from the convention from the hotel to the convention center in my whole suit. It was like 20 minutes. And so but I tried not to let that you always got to be thinking in a positive manner because like obviously I was pretty mad, but then when I got there I was thinking, okay, I guess I'm less jittery now. I got that out of my system. And then in the role play itself, the first PI was about explaining it was about overhead costs, and I didn't know what an overhead cost was. But I tried to take that head on. Like I tried to calm down a bit, think back to what I could connect it to the best, which was something I knew, like fixed costs, and then kind of just fake it till you make it in the actual PI, like act confident. I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know if the judge knew what I was talking about was like false, but in the end, I kind of got it. I got a pretty good like idea of what it was in the role play, and then I tried to carry myself in a confident manner. So even if I was saying something wrong, it's better than just like stuttering and thinking, oh, what if the judge is like thinks I'm not very smart or something.
Yeah, like especially in that high pressure situation, that's crazy. That hey, I'm glad you were able to make it though. That's good.
Yeah.
I, for so you talk a lot about practice and practice. What specifically does that look like? Because there's obviously the MCQ, there's going to be the role play, and then there's going to be like let's say there's other written. So what did that look for you in terms of practice, whether or not
Mhm.
it was through testing, PIs, or maybe actual role play practice?
Yeah. So for me, I think first, if you're a first year competitor, you really want to identify your strong suit. So for me, that was testing. Like I'm like a pretty good naturally, like I'm a pretty naturally good MCQ taker, but I knew I had to focus on the role play a lot more. But I know some people like struggle more on the MCQs, but the role play is like a piece of cake for them. So once you figure that out by maybe taking like your first role play and your first test as kind of a diagnostic, you can prioritize one over the other. And so my testing for me, that would look like probably taking a one full length practice test a week and then kind of just reviewing my answers, what I got wrong. Obviously, like DECA posts the answer keys at the end with the explanations. And they also have like a little link at the bottom that you can click where they like source some of their answers from. So you could research into that. I know I did that a few times. And then for the role play, it's really just getting as many reps in as possible. Like people tend to I mean, it works differently for everyone, but I think from my personal experience, people like tend to over prioritize trying to nail every single PI on like I don't know, like a spreadsheet. I know it's like, but it's kind of different for principles because I think the PIs are pretty much intuitive for a lot of people. So I think just getting used to the structure itself of the role plays as a first year competitor and how you would adapt in certain scenarios rather than just trying to like block out or prep out everything would be better. Yeah, just kind of just get your reps in basically.
Yeah, for sure. Practice is super important for role play specifically. So, what's the biggest takeaway or the lesson that you've learned from your time competing in DECA?
I think the biggest like kind of takeaway for me would be just keep just keep practicing. Like please, like I know people I know I definitely felt like I wanted to give up a few times, just mid test, practice test. Man, I don't want to do this. But if you start being results oriented and like thinking ahead what this could do for you and why you're doing this. This is an educational experience because it's like an educational organization, right? So no matter what happens, you're getting something out of it at least. So never try to doubt yourself or think that you can't make it because like it's you get out what you put in basically. Like the more work you put into practicing and trying to nail those PIs and taking those tests, the better results you'll get. It's proportional.
Okay, yeah, I think, Jalen, if you don't have any more questions, I think that's all the questions that I have. So now we're opening it up to anyone who wants to ask anything. You guys can ask anything as general or specific you want. Devin's all yours. And feel free to either unmute your mic or put it in the chat. And if no one has any questions, I'll just give it like a minute or two.
Yeah, I'll read one out that I got. So what do you or what did you love most about competing in PHT?
Okay, what did I love most about competing in PHT? I think first of all, I know like one of my friends was doing it, so like at competitions, I could just like we could be like, oh my God, that role play was so hard. Like if you have someone on your side to kind of relate it to, it doesn't seem as scary. And then for PHT specifically, I'd say um, I think just hearing also all the other people and like the finance events and whatever complaining about, oh my God, that was so hard. I was thinking to myself, wow, thank God I don't have to do that. And like I chose something that fits with me the best. But I think if you're trying to like pick your event as a first year competitor, just pick what's the most passionate for you. Like so for me that was PhD. Don't think about it in a lens of like, oh, what's the least competitive or like what's the easiest event. I think the easiest event will be the one that you're most motivated to do. And so that'll be the one that you're most passionate about.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
How long is the MCQ?
Okay, so the MCQ is 100 questions and 90 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And then I got another question in the chat. It was, how do you respond to each PI? Do you have like a certain structure for each one?
So I kind of went over this a bit earlier, but I guess I'll go more in depth. I'd start off with a transition, like try to be as natural as possible into your PI, and then kind of give it like a 1 to 2 sentence overview, and then try to tie it in with your actual solution, why it's important in this scenario. And then you should probably have a as many props as you can for PIs. So if you have a prop prepared, you can say, "Oh, so hi Judge, like I made this diagram to help you visualize this a bit better." And then you can walk through that prop. Or if you don't have a prop, you can just talk and be a specific with a real life example. Or yeah, I guess just go more in depth on your solution. But I think it should be maybe like 15%, or I guess like maybe like a 33% definitions and then like 67% like actual applications.
I think someone was asking like how much time you were spending to address like your questions and how much you were talking.
Yeah, so I'd say I'd spend around, like I said earlier, around a minute on the initial introduction, and then yeah, they said 6 to 7 minutes on role play. I think yeah, about 6 to 7 minutes would be a good amount of time, and then you can adjust this obviously depending on the role play, and then you just want to leave as much time for questions as possible. You don't always have to like hit that 10-minute mark perfectly. If you can nail like an 8 minute, 30-second role play, but you got everything down that the judge wanted you to address, you should be chilling.
And then I got one more. Do you want to use like specific business terms like cash flow, liquidity, sole trader, like basically how often do you use those types of like very specific words in your role plays, like for the
Um,
vocab?
I think less for PHT because it's less of a technical event, but you could definitely try to tie in some other terms like that would be more related to maybe marketing or customer service. Like I think I used oh my God, I forgot. Okay, no, it's like it was like service recovery paradox or something. And like that's like a really specific term. I low-key forgot what it means now after I studied it, but you want to throw in maybe a few like yeah, like a few of those in each role play. And then you always want to adapt to the judge, obviously. If you find that your judge, if you start like nailing out all this like jargon and your judge genuinely looks like bamboozled, you don't want to be using that and maybe switch to over to more like, I guess, layman's terms. But then notice your judge is like really into that type of stuff and like well and you think that the judge will like give you more points for knowing your stuff, basically, I'd say go for that more.
Okay, great. So someone also asked, which principles event would you recommend for someone who isn't sure yet about their interests or their passions?
Which principles event? Okay, so I'd say my answer to that question is I'd honestly just look over the past prompts for each different, like, I guess, principles event. Like you can look on like on the DECA website, they have like the old districts ones, or if your school has DECA Plus, you can go on and see the past role plays as well. And so just take a look at those past case studies and see which one like kind of draws it to you more. And I guess like if if you still don't know based off that, I'd say literally just choose one, send it at districts, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you can switch. But I think like in that process of practicing, like you'll know if you choose like principles of entrepreneurship or whatever, and like five practice role plays in, you're like, man, I actually hate this. But then you switch over to principles of finance, and you're like, okay, this is more my style. Then you'll know. So you'll never know right away. But just I'd say take a look at the past prompts to see which one it speaks to you the most.
Okay, I think that should be it. Um, oh, you can quickly answer that, Devin.
All right, he said, which type of calculator, which would you recommend on the MCQs? Uh, yeah, okay. I got this little like Pee-wee calculator on Amazon. I didn't really use it, but I think actually no, I did use it on one of the MCQ questions. So I just went on Amazon, got a little $5 like four function little Pee-wee calculator. I think it it doesn't really matter that much. Don't go in with like a TI-84 or anything because they'll just take it from you. But I think anything works. But to be fair, unless it's like the finance exam or something, I really don't think you'll be needing the calculator that much.
Yeah, okay, great. So I think that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for everyone that was able to attend. After this, we're going to post this on our YouTube. So if you guys want to outsource this to your guys' newer members or show this to you guys, it should be on the California DECA YouTube. So stay tuned for that. Apart from that, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for coming. Next month it's gonna be around the third Wednesday. It's gonna be around the same time. And also look out we're trying to get the Duolingo marketing CMO. So just keep posted for any informational or any type of information for that. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.